Hello, and welcome to this video on the AJH Synth Matrix VCF. A 32-mode analog filter, yes, 32, is based on a classic rare synth with lots of added twists. Here's what's to come in the video. This video is sponsored by AJH Synth. There's a bit to talk about here, so I'll add the timing on screen for the patches if you just want to skip straight to the sounds. So the Matrix VCF has a filter core that's based on the rare and highly sought after Oberheim Matrix 12 synthesizer. It's all analog, and AJH Synth have expanded the circuit to 16 distinct filter types and then given the option to twist these into another 16 sounds with the Polivoks resonance switch. Polivoks, as you may imagine, stands for Polivoks, and while this is inspired by the wild, saturated and characterful resonance of the original Polivoks synthesizer, this is a new and improved distortion and overdrive circuit specifically for the resonance path. The original goal of this was to make each filter mode self-oscillate, as they didn't on the Oberheim Matrix 12, but this adds a really broad addition of sounds and effectively doubles those 16 filter types up to 32. It's really quite wild in its versatility. In this video I'm going to lean into the unique elements and patch potential here, and while you'll hear lush classic analog synth tones, if you want more of that specifically, I suggest checking out the Dreams of Wires video on the AJH channel that I'll link below. So let's go through the features. We have our input and input level, which is handy for balancing out the resonance behavior. We then have the main frequency control, a frequency CV input and CV input attenuator, and then those Moog style pitch tracking inputs with a full volt per octave response, and then a third and 2/3 tracking responses too. We have a resonance control with a resonance CV input, and that pot becomes an attenuator when you patch in your CV. We then have the mode switch, which takes us through all 16 filter types, and while this pot moves smoothly, the control is a switch as you can see on the LEDs, and you have CV over mode with that mode input there, and then this becomes a CV attenuator too. We then have the Polivoks switch, which massively transforms the resonance character of the filter core and allows each mode to self-oscillate. That self-oscillation is often far from a basic sine wave, and it sounds different in each mode. There's some scope shots from AJH that I'll add to the video here so you can see some of those. But even when it's not self-oscillating, the audio character that imparts is a great addition to those classic Oberheim sounds. The Matrix VCF also has a built-in VCA, This is normal fully open, but patching in a signal, you can then control your output level and shape your sounds with a 0 to 5 volt signal input. Finally, there's the actual filter output. We have an output level, an LED here, and that's handy just for balancing things in your system, as this can put out some really hot signals. Like other AJH Eurorack modules, this is available in black and silver. I'll use both throughout the video. And not to blow my own trumpet, rather the Matrix VCF's trumpet, there's some amazing results and sounds in this video, from simple classic sounds and synth tones to more complex and advanced approaches. As well as the demo patches, there's also some no talking examples with patch notes on screen, so you can hear more of this sonic range and potential approaches to using it. The patches are on screen now. Do skip around with the timing index and chapter markings down below. So without further ado, let's dive in. So prepare yourselves for a ton of filter sweeps here. I'll go through the modes and overlay which one I'm on screen, as my hand might be in the way. We'll sweep the frequency, resonance, and you'll certainly see and hear when I put that Polivoks mode on and turn that back off as we go through. I'll try my best to balance the output level as we go. There will be a bit of volume difference here. So let's hear the Matrix VCF. So you heard a wide range of filter flavors there, but the subtleties might be quite difficult to hear just sweeping through them quickly. You'll hear much more of those in the patches, so let's get into those. So here's some really lovely, killer, squelchy, acidic sounds from the black left-hand Matrix VCF. There's a bit of a bonus secondary patch here that we'll look at from this one. But starting with the main squelch. This is a saw wave from a single oscillator coming into the input, pushing that in quite hard. I'm in the 3-pole all pass and 1-pole low pass mode here, a rather unique combination, and I'm modulating with a mixture of my volt per octave signal for some stepped motion alongside the pitch sequence to the oscillator, and there's also an LFO and an envelope. And really this example's all about these unique combination modes. I've never thought of using a 1-pole low pass and a 3-pole all pass together. It's just got such a great vocal squelch. This is then being sidechained in a VCA, just making that pump around the drums when the drums are playing. But muting that, the other patch here takes a pulse from the same oscillator with an LFO to PWM, so we've got this rich detune style PWM sound. That comes in and has a sequence over mode, and then a combination of envelopes and LFOs again, modulating the different tracking inputs there, and the frequency CV input. And we have a main 16th note just kind of chugging choppy envelope to the VCA. This comes into some reverb, let's remove it. And there's an LFO to panning. And I started by wanting just this kind of bandpass to complement this as a layer, actually sequencing through the modes and kind of chopping into the sound of the VCA. We have the Polivoks driven resonance on as well. Super squelchy. In this patch, I really just want to throw a lot of random modulation at filter cutoff, resonance amount, and filter mode, and get this kind of dancing, steppy, very rhythmic filtering. Now in the background, I have two mini-mod oscillators here. One of them plays every 3 notes as a bass line, and an octave higher, another one plays a 3-note arpeggio on top. These are being articulated through some low pass gates and effects. Let's remove all that for now. And here's the output of the Matrix VCF. It's fed the input, the sound that goes into it here from the Ring SM. Beef that up with the subs. Feed it the more static bass oscillator, or the higher arpeggio here, or combinations of both, or even ring modulated, more gritty, aggressive versions. Sticking with the simple one, let's remove some modulation here. I'll just pull it out for now. And let's just send in lots of stepped modulation. Starting with this green trace, although it's all the same 0 to 5 volt random CV, 3 different unique random sources here. We'll start with filter cutoff. Resonance. And filter mode. I'll then open this up fully. I have an envelope to the VCA, which again is chugging along with my clock signal. And I found that a little bit of LFO, say into the 2/3 or 1/3 tracking inputs, just lets you hear these sweeps a little bit, as it's not all totally stepped and on the grid. Some sub, and some of the other higher oscillator. Effects back in. Randomly shifting through the 16 modes there at different frequencies and resonance amounts. So we've just had some random sequenced filter modes, but I wanted to more intentionally kind of create a pattern and a riff where the sequencing of the filter is really a crucial part of it. And by kind of crucial riff or pattern making, it's not just the gate sequence and the pitch for the kind of melody or bass line that's important here. The actual sequencing of the filter is kind of a crucial part of this sonic hook. Here's the Matrix VCF's output on its own. And here's the other sound without the Matrix VCF. So there's quite a lot of backing here. Here we have the Matrix VCF by itself again. Let me remove this sequencing and we'll build it back up. So this is a mixture of two oscillators, one an octave higher than the other. It's two square waves with PWM on both of them from separate LFOs, with this big rich octave spread of PWM that's mixed and driven in the ring SM here. That then feeds the input of the Matrix VCF, where I first added a VCA envelope just to start creating my pattern. I then used the green trace and created a sequence in my main sequencer for the filter mode. Then the red trace sequence to filter cutoff, and the yellow trace sequence to resonance. Adding some effects, bringing the bass layer back in, getting these side chaining so an envelope ducks them against the kick. So here's a more West Coast, say Buchla and Surge inspired pinged filter, kind of dynamic percussive patch. Now there is some reverb, I think that works really well in context here, but if I remove it, this is the direct output from the Matrix VCF. Let's strip it back and go through what is a filter ping, and then build back up to this patch. So to ping a filter is to simply turn up its resonance until it's near self-oscillation, and not all of these modes oscillate without the Polivoks mode for the resonance. Some will though, I'm in the low pass 2 mode here, but to ping it is to get it near oscillation and then to excite it with a trigger, or in this case a short envelope. The green one is the top channel here on this mini mod mixer. Let's unmute it and this goes into the input. So the envelope comes in, excites it just for a moment, and that goes from a short click to a more defined note. And it's just about balancing that resonance level. Now I first wanted to be dynamic here and to use different levels of envelopes, which is what's coming into data here, different envelopes into the mixer, and to use those to strike and ping the filter. different rhythms. This is the blue one. Straight 8th notes on this red cable on channel 3. And 16th notes with a little ratchet on channel 4. That's the yellow cable there. So on the mixer I can bring in different rhythms. And hopefully you can hear we have different levels of ping, different envelope peaks in this case, exciting that input, resulting in a dynamic, level changing, think of it as velocity, pinged filter pattern. And there it is, just pinging, 4th octave tracking, and then with some added FM. Basically, these dynamic triggers mixing envelopes at different levels on different channels, mixed amount of envelopes or triggers coming in. It gives a really interesting musical sound. So let's explore some audio rate modulation. The left-hand oscillator sawtooth is my input, and the triangle out of the right-hand oscillator, which I'm offsetting up to much higher frequencies via a voltage in the volt per octave here, is my modulator. Green cable's input, blue cables and trace modulator, yellow trace is the direct output that we're listening to. And starting in that LP2 two-pole low-pass mode, got that lovely kind of creamy resonant filtering. Adding in some modulation. Super vocal. I kind of never tire of these really glottal formant oi oi style tones. Now if I start retuning to much higher frequencies, you can do this kind of high aliasing. Yeah, I'll stop. I'm sure I've edited lots of it out of the video already, but I love doing that. So different filter modes are going to respond differently. Let's check out, say, a bandpass. Polivoks resonance. That's really nice on the band. That's ridiculous. So you can hear it audio rate modulates beautifully, and that Polivoks resonance mode adds a lot of additional character. So making vocal, croaky, throaty sounds is good. I really love it. And I can be a little bit self-indulgent in just indulging in those sounds. I wanted to look at audio rate modulation and musical uses of it. If I remove it from this patch in its current state, with a simple envelope to VCA, envelope to the 3rd of an octave tracking, basic filter on a square wave from this left-hand oscillator. If I add this much higher tuned oscillator going through a VCA and modulated by a step sequence, so the level varies over time, if I add that to the frequency CV and turn it up, I've got all these very kind of digital sounding overtones that work really well. So let's strip this back and build it back up. So the patch starts with a square wave here, with a basic just clocked envelope to the VCA to create the shape of each note. I have a different rhythm playing a different envelope that I'll patch into the volt per octave for the most drastic effect here. So you can hear it doesn't play all the notes of that clock. It's a rhythm sequence as opposed to something steady. Now I'm using the frequency CV input where I'd normally patch an envelope and dial in an amount on the attenuator. So I have a choice of the other volt per octave, third of an octave or 2/3 tracking. And I like the more subtle modulation from the third CV input there. Now patching this straight across or opening up a VCA as if it's coming straight across. This is adding audio rate modulation from this oscillator, but let's turn it down in a VCA. This first patches out to a VCA. And then I'll modulate its level with a step sequence. So you can hear per step we have different amounts of audio rate modulation coming through. Now if I get both of these tracking the same pitch sequence again, we can be quite subtle or really full on. We could also say sync these oscillators, so the higher rate modulator is locked in to the one that's the input to the filter, maybe go lower. And then all I added was a little bit of reverb and some drums. Just wanted to give a little more love and kind of musical context to audio rate modulation here. So as an extension of kind of audio rate modulation, with the all-pass filter here, I wanted to see if we could approximate analog versions of phase modulation synthesis, or kind of DX, Yamaha DX style FM. Now an all-pass filter we think of as a phaser, a phase shifter. All filters work with shifting phases, but specifically the all-pass filter here, I wondered if I could use it to impart these kind of digital phase modulation, again DX FM-like tones. Well, it certainly doesn't sound like a DX7. We've got the kind of rich, lush analog backbone with some really interesting overtones here. Let me remove the effects and I'll play around with the tuning of the input oscillator and modulating oscillator so you can hear a bit of what we'll get here. I think it's such a good sound. Let me break down what's going on. So the left-hand minimod oscillator here is the input to the Matrix VCF, and we're coming straight out into the mixer. I'm choosing here with a mixer whether I send an offset voltage or an envelope, just so I don't have to repatch this as I change. So as I turn up an offset here, this is the oscillator coming straight through the filter, no modulation of any filter settings. As I say, this could also be a basic envelope on the output VCA. Now I have a modulating oscillator here, which is this shark tooth. The input is also a shark tooth, coming into a VCA. And if I simply turn up its level, and then turn up the amount of frequency modulation, which is where it comes, we have audio rate frequency shifting, or rather audio rate phase shifting via modulating the frequency in the all-pass mode. And as these are tuned in unison, we've got that lovely bit of shift and drift, giving it this rich, soupy kind of analog sound. If I split this lower at the input and higher as a modulator, the effect of that phase modulation is a bit clearer. But if we start to modulate the level of this, again thinking in kind of DX digital FM tones, the index, the amount of modulation, if we start to modulate this in a VCA, say with an envelope, this green trace here is now modulating the level of this shark tooth in a VCA before it modulates this frequency input. So we're dynamically imparting audio rate overtones here. And if on the output VCA, we're also enveloping the sound, this works really well. We could also change this to say be a step signal, so a step sequence will modulate the level of modulation. So we have different amounts of frequency modulation. Again, frequency of the filter, it's not frequency shifting. With the effects in, so here we're taking advantage of the all-pass mode to create a really lush but quite subtle phasing and tremolo sound as we have the VCA to adjust the level. There's an additional driven, noise modulated, really characterful layer from the left-hand black Matrix VCF, but let me mute that for now. This is a noisy, already ambient kind of crackle and noise Rhodes loop that I created a while ago. You may have heard it in other videos. And if I turn it up in the mixer, this is dry. And this is coming into the system here. One of the channels is coming in to this Matrix VCF. So if I turn down the dry sound and unmute this channel, I have 4 LFOs, 3 of which modulate the frequency of the 3-pole all-pass filter here, and 1 of which modulates the VCA. Removing the VCA modulation and 2 of the modulators here. This green trace and green cable is just moving the frequency of the all-pass, creating a phaser effect. The faster blue and slower red LFOs also come in here. So all 3 LFOs mix together in terms of modulating the frequency, which creates more of an evolving pattern over time than a more obvious cycling triangle. And then in this mixer, I'm mixing an offset voltage, because as soon as you plug into the VCA here, it removes the internal offset and normalization. So that VCA effectively goes off. So I'm adding an offset voltage to keep the VCA open, also mixing in this yellow trace, the fastest LFO of the bunch. You can hear that just pulsing, which is a basic tremolo effect, an LFO to level or to VCA CV. Now muting this in the mixer, the 3rd channel. This channel is the other side of the stereo input. I'm using a notch filter and the Polivoks resonance mode and modulating the resonance with noise into some reverb. And a slow LFO just shifts that frequency of the notch. And you get these kind of pain-saturating Rhodes key hits that make this noise or kind of flutter and more energetic. It's quite dynamic. And that just blooms out into this reverb. So turning that down low in the mix is a noisy ambient background, and then this back in. it suits that quite somber, lo-fi, already noisy input. So with this patch, I wanted to try audio rate modulating the mode, and I thought we'd just do it on camera, and if it's terrible, I'll cut it from the video. But I'm sure we'll get some interesting results. Whether it can keep up with this audio rate switching or not, we'll see. So without doing that with an input, let's just get this oscillating, and we'll flick into the Polivoks mode, which is going to kind of force all these modes to oscillate. It's got that drive and character in the resonance path now. And let's just patch across from, say, a triangle oscillator wave. Oh, it does lock in tune. Oh, it's brutal. It's kind of like video game crunch and downsampling, bit crushing. Oh, it's so aggressive. It's easy to tune into something musical though. Wonder if they track vault per octave well if I get both the filter that's oscillating tracking and, say, the mini mod. So that's the oscillator playing a sequence and the filter. It sounds so good. Let's try this as a kind of dynamic modulation, so I'll just repatch. Right, we're going to have to get an input here and just explore this kind of bit crushed, downsampled, gnarly effect. Yeah, let's do that, as I definitely want to hear some more of it. So this is where the curiosity in audio rate mode modulation led me, processing a beat. Now the beat that isn't through the Matrix VCF is a mixture of synthesis and samples down here. This is mixed together in the Minimod muting mixing VCA with its overdrive enabled, giving this driven mixed beat. You're listening to a copy of it dry in the mixer that's split into the scope just for some basic animation, and then into the Matrix VCF input. So muting it, turning down some effects. This is just the Matrix VCF. And the audio rate modulation comes from this oscillator going through a VCA. This is enveloped in time with the kick drum. Again, it's just a split stacking cable. Triggers an envelope to do that. And I'm mixing the result of this through a VCA with an offset so I can choose the place of where this lands within these modes. If I turn down the modulation, it's this offset, the mode is up full, this attenuates the incoming mode CV here when you plug it in. So I'm using the offset to choose the mode. And I'm happy somewhere in the middle, and then as I add to this offset in this mixer, this sound. And I can play around with the amount of the modulation and the offset. And really choose to place this little audio rate, laser burp or whatever you want to call it. Bit of reverb on that for some stereo width. And then bringing that dry beat back in the mixer. It's absolutely not what I'd expect from a multi-mode filter like this. So with the Matrix VCF, we have all the audio path that we need for synthesizing a great kick drum. And here I'm using it to make a kick. And for me, synthesizing analog kicks is all about that pitch envelope, so we're going to give that a lot of attention here. Here's everything that's not the Matrix VCF. All my backing percussion. Let me remove all that. And here's the kick by itself. Now, removing any frequency modulation here, they started by picking a mode that I liked the sound of while it oscillated. In this case, the bandpass 2. And turning up the resonance so it oscillates, and then I'm using an envelope, the green tracing cable here to the VCA, to shape the overall amplitude and level change for the note or the kick drum. And just keeping the amp envelope the same level, tuning in the amounts and depths of modulation going to the frequency. There's a big range of sounds in there. We could engage the Polivoks mode for the resonance, get some extra drive and character if we lengthen out that VCA envelope, the green trace here. Get some nice fulsome bass droning kicks. So with that kick dialed in, let's bring in the other drums. If you've got this far in the video, drop a Matrix sync in the comments. Do you have a favourite filter, filter type, mode or patch shown here? Again, let us know in the comments. Don't miss the extended patches exclusively on Patreon at patreon.com/DivKid. You can support there and gain access to exclusives and join the DivKid community on Discord, which is a wonderful space. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!